The final point under this section is with regard to what the most often cited passages do not say. We often have quoted to us pieces of Scripture about not mistreating or oppressing aliens, and they're found in places like Exodus 22:21, Leviticus 19:33 and 34. Well, if you look at those and other similar verses, they don't say more than not to mistreat or oppress resident aliens. This is the same principle as not mistreating or oppressing widows and orphans. It's people who are of a certain class, but it's really more about fair treatment and equal justice under law, not at all how many immigrants or which immigrants or aliens to admit or on what basis. It just does not speak to that, and to imply that it does is overstepping reason, to borrow a recent term. Third, immigrants having certain responsibilities that we find in Scripture. In the Old Testament, very interestingly, foreign residents were to comply with the Israelite laws, civil laws, criminal laws, but also many religious laws, such as the observance of the Sabbath. In other words, Scripture expects of sojourners, which means resident aliens, lawful permanent resident aliens, a strong assimilationist ethic. A strong assimilationist ethic. In addition, the Old Testament laws here allowed legal distinctions to be drawn between native Jews and resident aliens. The Gentile foreigners didn't necessarily benefit from such laws as the automatic remission of debts every 7 years. We see that obeying a nation's immigration laws is really a practical application of a principal Judeo-Christian commandment. Both Jewish, Catholic, and Protestant religions stress we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind. And we are to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. The practical application of that principle in the immigration context is to obey the immigration laws. That is how you love your neighbor. You obey what are the lawful standards of a given nation. That's respect for the body politic which the Lord has providentially established. Finally, what are the principles in the Bible that we can look at that apply mostly in our context of the United States today? Well, in light of the principles I've already hit upon, certain themes really stand out. Things like the rule of law and national sovereignty, promoting justice, assimilationist ethic, obeying the law as a desirable virtue, government's civic duty to safeguard the interests of its own citizens. Scripture leaves immigration policy to prudential judgment, to be set by a particular government according to prevailing circumstances, principles of justice, good judgment, and preserving the best interests of its citizens. And finally, when we hear the term the least of these, we should think in the public sphere as that term is used, that where immigration is concerned, it should take into account that each government's foremost responsibility is to its own citizens. Therefore, policies that privilege foreigners, wealthy elites, and special interests over the interest of average or less fortunate members of that society would seem morally obtuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.